Welcome to the Migrant channel. You can call me the Migrant. Today I want to talk to you about something that I think is very important for every migrant, especially those that are new in the country or those that are thinking of migrating somewhere. So, accessing information in a new country is vital for migrants' survival. It's also important to know what kind of information you need when you're arriving in a new country. So maybe one of the days I will do something around the lines of, pre-departure, when you're preparing, what documents you need to have, and, how to make them accessible for when you're traveling, for those that are traveling for the first time. I will do, maybe that will be the next recording, but this one I need to focus on accessing information and how vital it is. I got to know about this years after being in the country. Then when I look back and when I was reflecting, I thought of, wow, how much of a difference having this information would have made in my life at that time as a new migrant. Now, when I'm 14 years into being a migrant, it's definitely very important, I think, to share this information with people that are newly migrated or are thinking of migrating, or you have new friends that are migrants. Firstly, when you're thinking about accessing information and how important it is, I think it's so important to get to know where migrant organizations are. I know that in a lot of countries, associations, they are called, or organizations, they are called. In some countries, they are frowned upon. In countries where, of course, where there's a lot of anti-migrant sentiment, migrant organizations are frowned upon, or they're seen as the enemy and all of that. Migrant organizations are very important in any country that you are in. The reason I'm saying this is that this is where information is disseminated. So you need to find their names. If you just Google migrant organization in whatever country you're in or whatever city you're in, migrant organizations, usually they are non-profit organizations. They have legal officers that advise on things. They have case workers that look at your case individually and support you. They can almost do the job that some people would hire a private lawyer for. So it's really important to know where migrant organizations are and what they do. In various countries, you also need to know the difference between the type of migrant organizations. For example, you might have migrant organizations. I volunteered in one of them because that's where I got help when I was a new migrant and I was exploited as a domestic worker. So when I got out of the first place, the first person that I met, I told my story about not having been paid, and I was really heartbroken. I was thinking I would be getting deported. And I would arrive back home with very little money or with no money. I was really upset. And one of the women I met at a shelter where the immigration had taken me to said to me, I know a place where you can, where you can be supported to take your case to the labor courts. And she was right. That ended up happening. But I wouldn't have known that there was even something called a labor court. I could take a case, even if I was, at the time I had become undocumented as well, that I was entitled to being paid for the work that I did, even if I had been made to be undocumented because my employer had not applied for the documentation that they had said they would apply for when they gave me a job. So I didn't know all of that. That's why migrant organizations are so important. Think about it. If you went to an organization that, for example, is designed for, there are some organizations that are called Citizens Information or the Citizens Bureau, where you can get free access to information about anything, almost anything, whether it's transport or where to rent or whatever. They exist to give that free information. But while they're such a useful, an important resource, they are also not tailored around migrants, and sometimes they might not know. Now they are becoming to hire people with migrant information knowledge, because if you're going to an organization that's geared towards the wider population, they might not know about things like, oh, my visa is expiring next week and I haven't gotten a letter from the college or from my employer. They might not be able to answer these questions, while they are very important and very useful on things like, oh, where do I find the card for traveling around the city, or where can I do ABC? They might know about the wider society, but they might not know about migrant specific information, which is why I'm saying migrant organizations, whatever country you're in or thinking of going, are so important to follow their social media, sign up for to their newsletter to get updates as to what is going on. Because even I remember during COVID, when some countries were red listed, migrant organizations were also giving that information to say, if you are traveling or you're from this country, the government has introduced ABC. They are one of the first. Their job is to always keep migrants away. They, provide information that makes life easier for migrants. That's one thing. I know I've taken too long on that. The second thing is, when you're in a new country, please join community groups. It's so important. Do not sit in your own corner and say, oh, I'm really lonely, I miss people from home. It's, of course, you're going to miss them. But there are many community groups, be it sports groups if you have children. There are youth groups in the area that, they have very little in terms of money they need to pay for one to be a member. So please take your children to youth groups locally. They have such a wealth of resources. They are funded to support young people, especially marginalized young people, to have access to whether supports with homework and other things. So get to know about youth projects if you're a parent, you have young people in your house. But if you're just yourself, get to know about, say, whether it's women's groups. They might do things that are support groups. Sometimes you could be going through things emotionally where you need some support. You might not maybe afford a counselor, whatever. And again, migrant organizations, they do a lot of referrals to a lot of these services. So please make sure that you find your community groups, whether it's sports groups, whether it's women's groups, men's groups, whether it's singletons, if you're looking to meet new people. But of course, be careful about jumping into dating in a new country, because dating expectations might be different from where you come from. You can easily find yourself exploited. So please educate yourself around dating in a new country. But there's also groups like workers groups, so you know what rights you have as a worker. As I mentioned earlier, as a new worker, as a migrant worker, a new migrant at the time, I did not think that I was entitled to the same minimum wage per hour as the people from the country, which is a lot of migrants thinking that because migrant notion comes a lot with exploitation and all of that. We don't think about being as worthy as all others in terms of workers' rights. So migrant organizations, a lot of them would give information about the workers groups that you can follow, whether it's the au pairs in the area, it's the domestic workers in the area, it's the construction workers in the area, or it's the engineers in the area, because when you go to engineers and pilots, they would call themselves experts. When you're in lower paid work, then the migrant worker word still or identity still very much exists. So please join community groups. Also information about renting. How do you send, what do rooms, for example, even before sending a message to the landlord, whatever, what kind of rooms exist? So what are the costs for rooms, or for a full apartment or a house or whatever? Where is it cheaper to live as a new migrant, unless a salary is like very, very high? I would recommend starting in a small town. Unfortunately, in a lot of countries, jobs are so much concentrated in bigger cities. In bigger cities, there's high competition, rents are very high, the quality of accommodation is not as good. You end up being forced to live in a crowded city, where the rents are very high. But if you can do your research really, if you can get the same job you can find in a bigger city. If I were to advise a new migrant, me, now, if I can sit myself, the former new migrant, down with the knowledge that I have now and the experience that I have, I would say, look, find a job in a smaller town, the same kind of a job in a smaller town. It means that the costs are going to be smaller. They're going to be lower than in a big city. For people that love, going out and the bars and meeting new people, going dancing or whatever every weekend, they might not like this because smaller towns are a bit slower paced. But if you know why you're in the country in the first place, for me, my priority was to get an income, look after my family, send myself, my siblings or my children to university and all of that. That was the most important thing to me. So it wasn't, spending so much time on going out and all of that. It is important now and again. I still used to get out now and again, but my life here wasn't centered around spending so much money and going out all of the time. It was centered around building a better future for myself. For me, my priority was being able to go to university and also send my children, my siblings through university and looking after my mom or my granny. Those were some of the important things for me. But I will talk later about black tax and that while you're doing all of that, remember that you have to live yourself as well. It's the first time this year that I'm actually beginning to think that I'm retiring from black tax and retiring from looking after my family. I mean, after 27 years of doing it, since I was 18, around that age anyway, soon after school, I've done it long enough. So now it's the first year that I'm actually retiring from black tax, if there's such a thing. So where was I? Yes, I was talking about that, looking for information about finding what the rooms cost. Where is it better to live? If you can get the same salary in a smaller city, why would you go into a big city to spend most of it on rent? So that's my advice. Finding employment, oh my God, we all know that if you do not come from a background where maybe you're an heir, you inherited large amounts of money, you're born a prince or a princess, majority of us need to have an income to survive. And we know that majority of us, an income comes from employment. Not all of us are self-employed, have businesses and, they're geniuses in business. So finding employment is crucial. What kind of employment are you looking for, in that country? You need to know what the rules are. The job that you're looking for, do you require a work permit in that country? Can you work without a work permit? Because some people, if let's say, some countries, for example, in Europe, European citizens can work in any of the European Union citizens. They can work in any of the EU member states without requiring an additional work permit. So they can work anywhere. But if you're coming from, outside of the European Union, you will need some kind of a work permit. So you need to know what the rules are. Also, what job are you doing? Is your job within the list of qualifying jobs for a work permit, for example? Because, you might meet some people that will tell you, oh yeah, sure, you can find a driving job. But is a driving job listed among the jobs that can give you a work permit? Also, I know that a lot of employers would rather just do away with dealing with work permits paperwork, even if they don't know how difficult or how not difficult it is. A lot of the times they want to avoid that. So it might take you educating them about it and saying, actually, this process is not so complicated if you can get a work permit. And migrant organizations, again, they are very useful in this. They will not charge you a thing. Yes, when you start working, please donate to them because they do such a great job. But they will support you through this. That's what they exist for. You need to know what kind of migrant organizations, because some are dealing with, they're specialized in asylum and refugees only, that's their niche. Others are dealing with, for example, migrant workers. Others are dealing with, the ones I know, others are just legal centers. They're just law centers, so you need to know which migrant organization is best for your situation to go to. But all I know is that across the board, a lot of them will do a lot of issues to do with work permits or visas, or at least they will refer you to their colleagues, their sister migrant organization that specializes with that particular issue you might have. So finding employment, yes, you need to understand which jobs fall within the list of qualifying jobs for work permits. What is the process for applying for one? If you need a work permit, the time it takes, what is the easiest way? For some people, when you come as a student, you do not need to worry about a work permit because a student visa allows part-time work in a lot of countries. So whatever country you're going to, you need to look at how much or how little are you going to be allowed to work. That's very important. We need employment. Also, when looking for employment, do you need employment right now just for a stepping stone, or do you need to get into that career path that you want to get into? This is so important. I'll tell you why. I've met people, for example, and I have done so well. During my university years, I worked as a cleaner. For example, I would go to a cleaning job in the morning during my undergrad years. For the 3 years I was doing my honors degree, I was working as a cleaner at a restaurant. That restaurant would open at 11, so I would go and clean from 6 until 9. So I did 3 hours at the restaurant in the morning, and then at 9 o'clock I would immediately change, run to the bus stop, which was like 10 minutes away, and get on the bus and go straight to university. And the university was an hour away, so I was always 30 minutes late. And I did explain to them to say, I'm really sorry, because of my situation, I'm never going to get here on time because I have a cleaning job which finishes at this time. So when I'm coming to class at 10 o'clock, I'm coming from a cleaning job. So I did this cleaning job 6 days a week. And on weekends, I worked as a childminder. Those were my 2 jobs while I was in university for 3 years. So I did that particular job just so I'll be able to survive through the university years. You need to pay rent, you need to do this. Luckily, because of my voluntary work I had done with one of the migrant organizations I was talking about, I got a scholarship to fund my undergrad, because as a non-EU student, there was no way I was going to afford a degree, to pay for a degree, which was like 12,000 euro. There was no way I would be able that coming as a domestic worker, having a domestic worker salary, just coming from that job, there was no way. So I got a scholarship to pay my tuition, but I needed to be able to continue to pay my rent and still maybe a bit look after my mother and still send a bit back home. So I did that job to survive the university years. But some people cleverly also find jobs that are aligned with where they want to go career-wise. For example, I've also met people that have done care work whether they are studying or whatever, and they do care work, caring for the elderly or caring for people with disabilities, or in some countries it's called caregiving. And they've done this because maybe their career path, they wanted to be a nurse someday, or they wanted to be a social worker. So they wanted to stay in a profession, or a social care worker. They wanted to stay in a profession or in a smaller job that would be relevant for their work experience. Because when you get that job, you apply for that job, again, they're going to say, we need someone with 2 years experience or this. So if you haven't been working while you're studying, then you don't have that experience. So there are 2 ways to look at it. If you are, for example, I'm talking about people that are studying here. If you're studying, or if you are just not studying, you are a migrant, you're just looking for a job, start with the job. A lot of the times, yes, we know situation might require you to pick whatever you can find. I get that. But if you have the luxury of a choice, pick a job that will lead you towards the career path that you really want. So be strategic about it, is what I'm saying, when you're looking for employment. And then there is accessing education. For some of us, I've always had educational or education ambitions. I've always wanted to further my studies, an opportunity I didn't have when I was younger. It took me 18 years since I left secondary school to actually access third level education. I went to do my undergrad when I was 32. So I had been working as a domestic worker at that point. So, but I always knew that I wanted to be saving money away for one day when I would go to university, or my dream was like, okay, I can work as a domestic worker in Europe and in the evenings be going to university. That was my naive little plan, but it wasn't that naive, but the people that I ended up working for, they were not that supportive, so the working hours became too long that a lot of evening classes, for example, they would finish around 9 p.m., but I was working until like 11 p.m. some days. No, not actually 11 p.m. I was working like 11 hours. Two of the days I finished at 9 p.m. and then 3 days I finished at 7 p.m. That would be too late for me to go, because there wasn't a college that was close by. Colleges usually would start at 6 or 6:30. So if I was finishing at 7, I would be arriving at college maybe an hour late every time in the evening. Also, that course might not have been there in the small town where I lived. So, but really, if you're working during the day, you can actually, if you have education ambitions, you can study in the evenings. That's one of the good things about a lot of the developed world, that there are classes. But also middle income countries, I know for sure because I did go to ABET classes in the evenings in South Africa. That way, from after work, I would go to classes and then I finish around 9 p.m. So even outside the developed world, the so-called developed world, there is still opportunities for accessing education in the evenings if education is what you want to do. So if you want to take that path, really just follow those institutions on social media, know when their open days are. An open day is an information day where the universities or the institutions have set a day aside where they can just provide information about various courses they offer, how much they are, how to apply, and when to start, and all of that, the requirements and everything. So know when their open days are. Also, then there's general information, things like transport system of the country you're in. Is it cheaper to buy a transport card that you can just tap on like a bank card, when you're traveling around? Is it cheaper that way? When you're new, get to know about all these things, what transport system exists, seriously, how to pay. We might think this is not important. I remember one of the days that I took a tram when I was a new migrant. I didn't know that you don't pay inside to the driver, because different countries where you pay to the driver. I didn't know this here. On the buses you can pay to the driver, but on the tram you need to pay at the machine and then get onto the tram already with the ticket, because the only people that you'll meet on the tram are the people checking the tickets, that you have the ticket. I thought I would be paying, and so they came, sure enough, and genuinely I would have been given a fine. But when they came to me, I thought there were people that are looking to charge you, so to give you tickets. So I opened my wallet, I gave them the only money I had, and they said, you need to have a ticket. I said, I'm really sorry, this is the first time, I'm new in the country, this is the first time I've taken this tram. I didn't know that I don't pay on the tram, that's why I'm holding money. I thought I would have to pay on the tram. So they forgave me for that day, and they told me that next time you take a tram, you pay at the machine on the platform and then go onto the tram with your ticket already in your hand. So things like those, they might sound like small things, but actually you might end up having a fine. And in some countries, a small fine can even leave a stain on your immigration record. So be careful about things like those. Also, know where places to visit in your spare time. It's also important for your well-being. Being a migrant is hard enough. Sometimes you deal with difficulties settling in. Sometimes you deal with just people on the street hating you because you look like a migrant. Sometimes you have personal things in addition to personal things you might be going through. So just try to self-care during that time. In your spare time, go for walks, find places to visit around the country, that are cost effective if your salary is not that high. If it's high, of course, go as wild as you can. But I am kind of speaking on behalf of ordinary migrants that are on the low income end of things, because that's the experience that I had. I came in as one of the low paid workers, as a domestic worker. I didn't have a big salary. So reflecting on that, I'm just giving advice on how to survive with a very lean wallet, a lean pocket, or a lean paying job. So I think I will stop here. I've talked about, finding migrant organizations, knowing where to access information if you're new in the country, joining community groups and not staying in isolation, not sticking with people from your own country only. I've seen people that come into your country and they stick with their own people for like 20 years. Please network and meet people from different countries, and you grow that way as a person. You also become culturally aware when you're open-minded like that. I'm not saying shun your own people, spend time with them, but also you've spent time with them forever, all your life. So it's now time to meet new people. Renting in a new country, how to find listings, what rooms cost, where is it better to live, and all of that. I talked about finding employment, what kind of employment, and all of that. I've also talked about, being strategic when you're looking for work, whether staying aligned within your career or your from home or the career that you want to start. And accessing education for those that would like to further their studies, and as well as general information about, traveling, seeing the country while you live in it. Don't be like a visitor and stay in the corner for like 20 years and have never seen the landmarks of the country and all of that. So I think I'll stop here for today. Please join the conversation, comment below, and tell me what you would like to hear. Share your own experiences, your migration journeys, what you found helpful when you were in a new country, or what country you would like to go to that you're reading about. And if you're a would-be migrant, feel free to ask any questions from a veteran migrant at this point. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Migrant channel. I am a migrant. Call me the Migrant. Please share this channel with others, and thank you so much for listening. I look forward to the next recording, and see you then. Bye.